would like to share with you my reading of Fratelli Tutti. Now, I cannot pretend to present the most exhaustive and the most accurate analysis of the document. No, this is one particular reading. So I'm encouraging you, first of all, to please read the encyclical. No, there is no substitute to getting hold of a copy and read it. It is quite long, and you'll find that sometimes it is repetitious. And but the fascinating thing is you will find there some of the key ideas of Pope Francis's papal ministry, vision, and his teachings, always grounded in the Bible, in the events of daily life, and in the social teachings of the church. He always sets himself in the context of the great tradition of the church. But there is also one distinctive character of Fratelli Tutti. I think it belongs, as many of the closest collaborators of Pope Francis have affirmed, this encyclical forms a triad, with two other encyclicals. And the unifying factor is the memory of Saint Francis of Assisi, whose name Pope Francis took. The first encyclical is Evangelii Gaudium, which was inspired by the experience of Saint Francis. Rebuild my church. The message that Saint Francis heard. And the whole of Evangelii Gaudium is the vision of Francis, now Bishop of Rome, on how to bring the church to the 21st century and beyond, rebuilding the church through the joy of the gospel. Then came another encyclical, Laudato Si. And the very opening lines are from St. Francis's Canticle of Creation, where again, Pope Francis stresses the fact that by quoting St. Francis's Canticle, he is not just giving us a writing or a body of teachings which would be labeled by some as green teaching. No, he said it is not about just climate change. It is part of the social teachings of the church, our common responsibility for our common home. So it is not just green, it is, he expands it into what later on we would also hear, the universal destination of the goods of the earth, and therefore the universal responsibility in being guardians, stewards of creation. And then this third, Fratelli Tutti, again, Saint Francis of Assisi, from his admonitions on being brothers and sisters one to another. So I think it is important to see how he takes seriously the name of Francis, and how he allows Saint Francis of Assisi to inspire his vision of the church, of the mission of the church, and his reading of the contemporary world. My next comment will be on the method used by Pope Francis in this encyclical, which he has been consistently using in his other writings. And I think it merits our study, serious study, the methodology. If people would pay attention not only to the contents of his writings, but also to his method, his pedagogy, then I think many people who have some questions about his teaching would understand him better, understanding the methodology. What does Pope Francis use here? We are already familiar with it. First is reading and analyzing the situation, always with the eyes on the present world and the trends that we find in the present world. That we find in chapters 1 and 2 of Fratelli Tutti. Then comes the interpretation in the light of faith. So it's not enough to see and to analyze, but to interpret, to go to the deeper meaning of what we have seen. And here it is the moment of discernment and judgment towards, in Fratelli Tutti, towards a world that is more open to love. Then the third method is responding. It is not enough to see and to interpret in the light of faith. We are asked also to respond. And in this case, in Fratelli Tutti, the response is how to construct a humanity that is more open and therefore a better place to live in. This we find in chapters 5 and 7, 5 to 7. And he closes with, Father Willen used the term ecclesiology, a vision of the church of communion, how the church could be at the service of universal brotherhood and sisterhood. So some would say this is not just a method, this is a spiritual vision. Well, he's a Jesuit, schooled under the guidance of Saint Ignatius of Loyola. So you see this, reading the signs of the times, interpreting in the light of the faith, responding, and then also celebrating our calling as church. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay. Now, so those are some preliminary things. Now let me go to the first major point that I want to stress, and it is to join the Holy Father in looking at the world of today, especially to be attentive to the signs of the lack of brotherhood and sisterhood in our world, to open our eyes and to be honest in declaring this is a sign that we lack brotherhood and sisterhood in our world. Signs that are often hidden, signs that are clothed beautifully in order to hide the destruction that is happening in the human family. It says we should be attentive to how the poor, the forgotten, the neglected are all the more suffering in this throwaway culture. It's not just objects that are being thrown away, but human beings. And for the Holy Father, this throwing away of peoples as though they are non-persons happens in a mentality, in a context, and even structures of being closed. Being closed. We should be attentive to those signs of a world closing its doors to the others. It could be my small personal world that I am closing into myself, and nobody else could enter. Even probably the Holy Spirit is not allowed to enter. And those that are being excluded, the migrants, the women, the girl child, the victims of trafficking in human persons, the victims of the new forms of slavery, the harvesting of human organs, and many more. And so the Holy Father is asking us, open your eyes and look for closed doors. But you will see those closed doors also if you read the signs from the perspective of the poor, the rejected, and the victims. So that face alone, that reading already requires some sort of a conversion, because I can read the signs from a perspective of superiority, from a perspective of even triumphalism. But we could understand better the experience of those who are excluded, who face closed doors and windows and hearts and hands, if we enter the world of those that have been neglected by society. And this is an ongoing thing. You're an international organization. Wow. I will be very much interested to see how the different regions experience this closeness, worlds closed, especially during this pandemic. During this pandemic, we are scandalized in seeing institutional, human closed doors during this pandemic. So this is the first major point. The second is the gospel light, the light from the gospel. It's a very rich portion here from Fratelli Tutti, especially in chapters 3 and 4. But I would like to focus on what I think, this is my view, on what is fundamental in the Pope's vision of a world that is open to brothers and sisters. And it is universal love. Universal love. But how does Pope Francis depict universal love? In number 94, we see this description. Universal love is openness. It is openness to the other, as opposed to being closed in on oneself, on my group, on my family, on my culture, on my community. Love by its impetus, is openness to the other. It is seeking. Love is a form of seeking union with the others. Love sees the value of the others. Love celebrates the worth of the others. Love sees the beauty in the others as they are, not as I want them to be, but as they are. And love seeks what is good, or maybe better, what is the best for others. And Pope Francis in number 94 says, only by cultivating this way of relating to one another will we make possible a social friendship. Social friendship that does not exclude anyone. And a fraternity or sorority that is open to all. Open to all. And if we ask the Holy Father, yeah, this is a beautiful vision, but is this just a poetic expression? Is this romanticism? Is this idealism? Is this utopia? I think the response is no. This is how God loves. This is how God has manifested himself. This is how Jesus loved and even died for all. This is how the Spirit blows. God, who is love, is total, full openness. Full openness. And even to those who are against God, we sinners, the door is always open. God sees the worth even of the greatest sinner. And God, in God's saving plan, desires the best, the good, the salvation of everyone. So this is not based on just a romantic vision. It is rooted in our experience of God, revealed in Jesus and the Holy Spirit. The Holy Father chose the parable of the Good Samaritan in Luke 10 to illustrate this universal love. No, the Samaritan who, in the context of the time, was considered an outsider by those who belonged to the chosen people. And there was mutual animosity. And according to historians, they probably had valid reasons for hating one another, for being prejudiced against each other. But in the parable of Jesus, of the Good Samaritan, we see that this figure saw someone lying on the ground, a victim of robbers and of violence, and of theft and violence there, and left for dead. Now, that person lying there was unknown to the Samaritan. He did not know the nationality. He did not know the educational standing. He just saw someone who was in need. And the openness of the Samaritan to stop to come close to that so-called stranger and to treat that person not as a stranger, but as a brother. He held him. He tried to apply first aid, and then he took the person to an inn. And the Holy Father interpreted it in this way. The Good Samaritan invited other people, first the owner of the inn, to be an instrument also of universal love. No? And the Samaritan used his own resources. Imagine, it's like wasting your money on someone whom you do not know. Maybe that person was a brigand, maybe a criminal, so maybe he deserved that violent attack on him, but it doesn't matter. The Samaritan used his resources for the good and the healing of this so-called stranger, and promised that if the innkeeper would spend more, then he was willing to pay more. So using the image of the Good Samaritan, the Holy Father gives us some of the elements of this universal love, but not anymore as theories, but as part of a narrative, part of a parable. And narrative has a power of its own to communicate, through images and through the succession of events, what this universal love is all about. And as I will point out later on, this is not just a manner of speaking for Jesus, and this is not just to shock his hearers. In the life and ministry of Jesus, he makes many outsiders as heroes and heroines of the faith. He himself, in his speech and in his action, is teaching or was teaching everyone to be open, to be open to God's action through the unknown people or even the enemies. Okay. Are we still okay? Yeah.
Yes, Cardinal. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now I move to so from that description of the first is reading the signs of the times, especially signs of closing in on ourselves. Then my interpretation of this universal love as the key to Fratelli Tutti, this openness to everyone, and especially after the model of the Good Samaritan, which contained the very heart and mind of Jesus Christ. The third point that I would like to raise is this, which I think is important for responding, and it is this. The Holy Father does not say it this way, so please don't quote me as as having said that the Holy Father said this, and this is my interpretation. I think the Holy Father is very much aware that universal love can remain a mere concept, or worse, a slogan. And it makes it provides for us a beautiful slogan: universal love, universal peace, etc. But that's the danger. The danger. I think the response, is crucial for universal love that brings about universal brotherhood and sisterhood from becoming a mere slogan. I remember hearing from one of my professors a Jesuit professor. He said, some people would say, I love humanity. It's human beings I hate. So yeah, when it comes to, wow, I love humankind, but please don't give me don't give me human beings, concrete human beings to deal with. That's why I think the remaining chapters of Fratelli Tutti present to us, again, this is my reading, present to us this dynamic relationship or even tension between the specific concrete person and the universal worth or the worth of all human beings, the universal dignity, the common dignity of all human beings. And the Holy Father would always say, no, you cannot enter the dignity of all human beings without entering through concrete, specific human beings. This we find, for example, in paragraphs 87 to 127, or even 198 to 24. Friendship. No? So the Holy Father would talk about friendship, but also social friendship. But we develop the so-called social friendship, a society built on friendship, only by also developing specific friendships with specific persons. If I am the friend of all, but I cannot mention a name of a friend, then well, is it a slogan? What is it? No. The same applies to the local culture. The Holy Father affirms the need to develop local cultures, to appreciate local cultures. For every human being comes from a culture. A culture is a way of being human. But the local culture must be open to universal solidarity. And universal solidarity does not eliminate the uniqueness of every culture. In fact, universal solidarity is developed when each culture, in its goodness, its strengths, and its weaknesses, participate in the universal family. They enrich one another. They strengthen one another. They learn from each other, respecting the uniqueness of each culture and not forcing cultures to disappear in the name of the so-called universal culture, global culture, which in the end is also manufactured by some powerful cultures. So it is an imposition rather than respect, brotherhood, or sisterhood. So the local cultures, universal solidarity, you find that in 142 up to 153. The same with private property. Yes, no, there is private property, but never absolutized because of the universal destination of all the goods of the earth. God created the goods of the earth for each one of us and for all of us. No? And so when the common good requires my letting go of my property, even if I had gotten it through legitimate ways, the common good is like a magnet that draws me in. So private property and also the universal destination of goods, 120. National politics and political charity in international relations. Yeah, the Holy Father warns us that the national politics should avoid the trap of what he calls populism, the misuse of the people, in order to promote very narrow ideologies or political agenda, and which makes the supporter of one political agenda the enemy, automatically the enemy of those who differ from. So in one country, there could be, political enemies. Because of political affiliations, even families don't speak to one another. Brothers and sisters, parents, etc. So yes, we're entitled to our national politics, but make sure, the Holy Father is saying, our politics is really popular in the sense that it serves not only the wider good of our country, but of the whole world. International relations must be imbued with political charity. So that's 154, 197. Forgiveness. Now, this is very, very difficult. And here the Holy Father even appeals to the experience of mothers. The mothers, who among the mothers would resist forgiving an erring child? Forgiveness, which is, it is grace, but forgiveness which does not deny justice, which does not forget the horrors inflicted on others, but a forgiveness that refuses to remain closed in hatred and vindictiveness to the other, even to the greatest criminal. This is something that only God could give us, And so he challenges the theories called the just war theories, using war in order to solve conflicts, or even the death penalty as a deterrent to crime. He says studies have shown that these are not working. These are not working. And then we make ourselves also prisoners of our hatred, of our desire for vengeance. And in the process, we lose the openness called universal love. And finally, for our religious identity, the Holy Father respects concretely, each person's and each community's religious identity. And it is this identity that enables us to dialogue with others. Dialogue does not mean being wishy-washy, unsure about my identity. Only those who are firm in their identity, secure in their local personal identity in terms of religious identity, they are capable and secure enough to dialogue. Yeah, and the last chapter was really a call to Christians to find our place as Christians in fostering fraternity, sorority through our friendly relationship with peoples of other religions and other faiths. So whether it is politics, economics, religion, etc., war and peace, private property, the Holy Father is telling us that this universal love, this universal friendship should not float up there in the air. It happens in our immersion in the local, which is always open to the others because we inhabit one common home. We are one family. And so the Holy Father goes back to the basics. How do we do this? He says, encounter people, meet cultures. What he calls the culture of encounter. He says, sometimes we are afraid of the others, but we have not even encountered, we have not even met one of them, but we're already afraid of them. So this universal love, this new politics, this new economy, this universal friendship and forgiveness will happen if we meet concrete individuals, meet cultures that are different from ours, meet communities, and in the spirit of openness and loving, hopefully we could forge a better politics, a better economics, a better society, a better way of resolving our conflicts, because the common good, which includes the individual good, the common good promotes the individual good, and my individual good must serve the common good, because this tension, vice versa, is preserved. Yeah, and most especially may I go back to that first point that I had, that read this from the perspective of the least, the victims, those who have suffered because they have been neglected. They had no friends to turn to. It is when we hear their stories that hopefully we would be more convinced of the necessity, the urgency, and the beauty of universal love, of universal friendship, of universal brotherhood and sisterhood, promoting the common good. Let me now close. I think very many of you are happy that I'm closing now. Let me close with some suggestions. First suggestion is the formation of character, the formation of the human and Christian heart. Formation in loving, the purification of our loving, which means I think now we should confront our own prejudices, our biases that hinder us from being open to others. And this should happen not only individually, but also as families, as cultures, because all of us have those biases and prejudices. And I think Fratelli Tutti invites all of us to undergo that painful but liberating, very liberating and saving process that purifies our capacity to love. The second is, since institutions, policies are crafted by human beings, cultures are developed by human beings, and afterwards they acquire almost like an independent existence. But if we want to change institutions, we cannot just wait for them to change by their own efforts. They were created by human beings. And so we should invest in the transformation of policies, of rules, of institutions, of structures and cultures that have dominated us and have been accepted by us as the normal. And then we just wish, oh, we wish the structures would change, but no structure will change without human beings, no, changing them, because they were put in the first place as a structure by human beings. The human beings who have in a way institutionalized their own biases and also their own values. So this formation of the heart, but also the formation of institutions which are reflective of our hearts. No, I think we need to do that. The third suggestion is maybe as a union of Catholic women's organization, you could collect not only writings, but maybe stories of women who have suffered, but have resisted the temptation to close their hearts and their doors. The stories of universal love, universal motherhood, of universal sisterhood that will affirm the validity of the encyclical. I think we need this encyclical needs authentication not only from theoreticians, you know, and who would say, oh, this point is good, etc. No, but narrative is important. Narrative is important, and I have seen the truth contained in Fratelli Tutti in the witness of many valiant women, mothers, religious women who have their stories to tell. The JRS, the Jesuit Relief Services, compiled the stories of, had a compilation of stories of women refugees, you know, from different parts of the world. And I've been very much encouraged by that collection. And I remember one story of a refugee woman from the Karen community, no, Kareni, and she started running away from violence with her family. And as they kept on moving from one place to another, she ended up in one camp alone. And when she said when she was sick one day, that's where she realized that she was alone. She was crying out for her mother, but she did not know whether her mother was still alive. But then she heard somebody crying also. And she said, I'm not crying alone. I'm crying with many. So that gave her strength. She studied. She was sent to the Philippines and finished an education degree. Now she is a teacher in refugee camps, embracing all the refugees as her brother or sister, as her parent. No? And this is just one story that for me validates. No? Some people might say, yeah, Fratelli Tutti, a good dream, but it will never be achieved. No, it's happening now. But we need to tell the stories of those people who have lived even through the point of suffering and death, you know, lived their conviction of universal friendship. And finally, you know, we turn to Jesus. The Holy Father used the parable of the Good Samaritan, and it's a powerful a tool. I suggest that we go wider and to look at other teachings of Jesus and his very very ministry and life, how he showed to the outcasts, the tax collectors who were embarrassed to be seen with anyone, like Zacchaeus and Matthew, the woman caught in adultery, and the Syrophoenician woman, whom initially Jesus compared to a dog, but later on she became a model of faith. You know? And then Jesus's conversation with the woman from Samaria, the Samaritan woman at the well, and how that conversation that started with water led to a profession of faith, and the missionary outreach of this woman, telling people about the prophet who had told me everything that I had done, things like those. And we see that in the life of Jesus, the outsiders, were treated as brothers and sisters. The promise of paradise was given to a criminal hanging beside him. Today you will be with me in paradise. The promise of forgiveness. You do that if your heart not. It cannot be fully understood, and each one's conversion to the ways of Jesus. Let me end.
Sorry?
So thank you. I end there.